Thank you. So that's mine. You ready, Professor Mark?
Yes.
Okay. So just for a few seconds, I will introduce you first, and then I'll just turn to you and just talk to me.
Yeah, sure.
And do through your voice, and so that he can capture you.
Right.
I'll just go to 3 and then we'll begin.
Okay.
1, 2, and 3. Hi, welcome to the National Critics' Choice Online News. I'm Robin Steinberg, and welcome to the Steinberg Review. Today we have a Professor Mark R. Thompson, who's going to share with us some issues on and updates on Philippines and how Philippines is able to corrupt. Sorry, just one more time.
Hey, sorry, if you could also mention that I work at CDU and as director of the
Yes.
Southeast Asia Research Center, that'd be great.
I will.
Okay.
I will do that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Take 2. Hi, welcome to the National Critics' Choice Online News. I'm Robin Steinberg, and welcome to the Steinberg Review. Today we have a distinguished guest who's none other than Professor Mark R. Thompson, who is the director of Southeast Asia Research Center, and also the professor for City University of Hong Kong. And he's here to share with us some issues and updates on corruption in the Philippines. Professor Mark, thank you for joining me here. Can you tell us more about what's happening right now in Philippines and how the Aquino government and its administration is trying to cope with the changes and the pending issues with corruption?
Well, as I mentioned today, earlier, that corruption is at front and center of his administration. During the campaign for the presidency in 2010, he talked about corruption and the importance of combating corruption. He presented himself as a reformer. His slogan was, "I will take the Philippines down a straight path. If there's no corruption, there will be no poverty." So this is what he promised, and as he's taken office, he's continued to say that his chief priority, his top priority, is to combat corruption. And one of the things he's focused on, of course, are the misdeeds of his predecessor, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. He's put her under house arrest. He had the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice he had her removed through a trial in Congress.
Now, what kind of challenges right now Philippines is facing right now? Has corruption been minimized?
I don't think anybody would say that. I think what has changed is people's attitude toward the Philippines. I think it's fair to say that within the Philippines and outside the Philippines, there's a greater sense of optimism that's been there in the past. There are still problems with administration. There's still petty corruption, as they say. People still ask for bribes in a variety of contexts that affects both foreigners and Filipinos alike. One thing that's clearly changed, there haven't been any major scandals, sort of the grand larceny style corruption under Aquino like there were under his predecessor, Arroyo. There are a number of high-profile scandals. That hasn't been the case. He's managed to keep his family at arm's length, so they haven't been involved in any scandals. None of his close friends have been accused of major misdeeds. So the atmosphere has improved. The real question I have is whether he's made the systematic kind of reforms that corruption will go down significantly in the long term. And there I have a question mark.
Now, you mentioned today that, in a seminar that you say that it's actually got to start with the domestic will of the people that desires, a country that is corrupt-free. Is that still an issue today, right now?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, and that's one reason why Aquino won the election with the biggest plurality of any post-Marcos president in 2010, and it's one reason why he's still the most popular president since Marcos ruled the country, is that people do want reform, and he is still promising reform, and he does so credibly. He seems to be trusted by most Filipinos. He seems to be liked because he has emphasized his anti-corruption drive as his top priority. So I think there are clearly demands from society for improvement in that regard. NGOs are very active in the Philippines. Many of them concentrate on issues of corruption. I mentioned the example of one group that checks to make sure textbooks that are promised to schools are actually delivered. So the delivery of government services. I think society is becoming vigilant. It's becoming more conscientious about these things. The press is more active. So there is a strong support base for an anti-corruption drive. And that's one thing that Aquino is making use of. And that's probably one reason there is progress being made, is because society is demanding it.
Now, so speaking about demands, has ASEAN been the key role player, putting tremendous pressure on the Philippine government to ensure that there will be a transparency of all the policies and proper governance, especially when it comes to customs and immigration.
Right.
And does that help?
Well, sure. I think it helps, although I think it's also fair to say the ASEAN way is not to intervene too much. And ASEAN has never been an interventionist organization, and even less so than, say, in Europe, where the new members of Europe, such as Romania and Bulgaria, have been under a lot of pressure to improve their governance. There are standards in ASEAN, and the Philippine government is aware of that. And as I mentioned in the seminar, there are a lot of very talented technocrats in the Philippines, and many of them have, spent time either in ASEAN-related organizations or at ASEAN meetings, so they know about these standards. So there's a consciousness. Of course, it comes from other places as well, from the World Bank, from the Asian Development Bank, from other international organizations, from NGOs. So there's a strong understanding of what these international norms are. There's also an understanding the Philippines doesn't live up to these norms as well as it should. And that's one of the reasons why the anti-corruption effort is so popular, because people know the Philippines is lagging behind in governance. It needs to improve that. And Aquino seems to be fulfilling that need. And he, at least at the rhetorical level, he's succeeded in convincing people that he's sincere.
Now, what's next for Philippines? And if you were to be asked upon the Philippine government, what are the 3 key recommendations would you give?
Well, to answer your first question, actually I am cautiously optimistic about the Philippines. It has achieved high growth rates, some of the highest in the region in the last few years. It has some very dynamic industries. I mentioned the call center industry. It has its macroeconomic finances in order. And there are signs that governance may be improving at certain levels. So the Philippines is clearly moving in the right direction, and this is not just a result of the current administration. Reforms were undertaken in the past. The 3 recommendations I would make are, first of all, an educational offensive. Philippine education has suffered a decline, in some cases a quite severe decline, beginning at the very lowest levels and reaching all the way to the top universities. It's underfunded, and as president, I think, or the president of the Philippines needs to pay more attention to that issue. To be fair to Aquino, he's got other things that he needs to deal with first, but I hope he finds time to focus more on education. The second thing, something that Aquino does talk a lot about, but as I mentioned, has lagged, is infrastructure, starting with the Manila airport, which still could use some upgrading. There's work being done on that, but slow. But a lot of other infrastructure projects. They have lagged a bit in the first 2 years of the administration. The Aquino government says that's due to checking the contracts, making sure they're not corrupt, the ones signed under Arroyo, but I hope the offensive really does resume. And the third thing I would recommend is that the government really finally sort out the peace and order situation. I think more than anything else, it's this image of the Philippines as a dangerous place that deters foreign investment, that keeps tourism down at levels much lower than they should be compared to Thailand, Vietnam, and other places that get higher, Singapore, of course, get much higher level of tourism. If the Philippines can do a better job, and in certain areas, as I mentioned, Davao, for example, in the southern Philippines, a major city, has become much safer. But if that can spread to other parts of the country, and the Philippines' image can change as a place that it's safe to go to, that it's enjoyable to visit, and a good place to invest in, I think that will also help the country.
Now, would you see a change for the government as well as the investments, if they were to cooperate one another, would they able to accomplish what they would see as a better Philippines? Say, investors would come to Philippines and they would settle down, and they would give some form of infrastructure support with the Philippine government. Would that happen? And what advice would you give for foreign investors who wants to invest in Philippines, but they are not they're not really apprehensive?
Okay. Aquino has been talking a lot, and to the extent that these things can be verified, has actually followed up on his promise of private-public partnerships. So he is trying to work with business, and this is primarily Philippine business, but also foreign business, He's an investor-friendly president, there's no doubt. He's open to foreign investment. There's certain obstacles in the Philippines, including constitutional provisions. As far as my advice to foreign investors, one thing that's obvious when you come to the Philippines is it doesn't have the kind of infrastructural level that Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand do. It's perhaps still a little bit better than Indonesia, but the foreign investors need to be patient. I think there are some interesting opportunities in the Philippines. I think that there are certain parts of the Philippines that are actually quite safe, good to do business in. But foreign investors need to have a longer-term vision. It's not a place to invest money in very quickly and take it out quickly. It's a more longer-term thing. And I think the success of the call center industry, the so-called business process outsourcing, indicates that in certain areas where the Philippines is well equipped, that foreign investment can be quite successful. That's a booming industry, and it's driven primarily by foreign investment.
Well, thank you, Professor Mark Thompson, for sharing with us some
pleasure.
updates and insights on Philippines. And thank you for joining me here at the National Critics' Choice. I'm Robin Steinberg, and have a good week ahead. Thank you, sir.
Surely.
We'll do an edit and I'll send
Yes,
to you.
and please send it to me, yes. Thanks very much.